just an introduction myself. I'm going to be covering, I'm going to be describing how, when applying APQP, what aspects of it, what proportions of it is actually covered. My name's Carl Evans. I work for Rolls-Royce. I'm the SPIG team leader for this group. Been involved with APQP for many years now. Seen it from the early days of AS 9145 being written right through currently to today. So if we could move on one, please. Slide. So before getting into the breaking down the various components of APQP and talking about it in a more simplified ways, I want to start with the point of, first of all, why? What does APQP give us? There's various pieces of information you can find around if you go searching the internet. One I find really useful is actually there's a really good industry paper. It's been written by a fellow from Pratt & Whitney, and actually what it poses is a comparison between two engine programs, one where APQP has been applied and PPAP, and one where more traditional methods are being actually deployed. Reminding ourselves about APQP and its objectives. I mean, as an objective, it's all about improving quality and reducing cost. What's really important in regards to those statements and our industry is when you've got high levels of quality, that's absolutely synonymous with increased product safety. So the case study I've sort of drawn on here is, and if you could reveal one more piece, please, what it gets to it, at the bones of the information is, and the graphic I'm showing is just overlaying those two lines. The blue line is the more traditional approach to product realization, and the green line is actually the application of APQP during that on an engine program. And really what it's saying is, the essence of it all is the comparison says we get in the case of these two engine programs, and the comparisons between them is the improvement is 40% better in 2 years earlier. And what I mean by that is if plotting the actual numbers of defects on the different engine programs, at the point of stabilizing is the time relationship, and then the difference between stabilizing is actually the level of the lowering of defects. So when you look at the data, what it's essentially saying is when you apply an APQP, we're actually seeing in this case study maturity or a reduction in the actual quality defects, stabilizing 2 years earlier than the comparative engine program that's looked at, which is 2 years long further. Plus there is a difference, and the difference is shown the amount of quality defects that are actually experienced from this program. So there's data around which suggests that APQP is good. It gives us what we need, so it's a positive. If we can move on one more slide, what I would reflect on in personal experiences is 3 things when I talk about APQP at a project level and a part level and a people level. Firstly, carrying out analysis of engine programs in our own business, we've definitely seen a correlation between the more intensity APQP and PPAP is applied. So when I say intensity, it's the application of it, the involvement of the cross-functional working and the teams involving it, and well and truly integrating it within project management. There's really a strong indication against the industry case study of what we see in engine programs. In other words, we do see an increase in maturity through the application of APQP and a reduction in quality or an improvement in quality performance. At a part level, when I'm talking about a part level, I'm giving an example here. It's not the box. I'm giving an example. It's what's in the box. Due to the nature of the parts and details of that, I'm not going to show you the physical part, but what I can definitely say is it's highly complex design. And just taking a quote from our engineers and their experiences, first out the box, in terms of this product, it was concession free. And that's all down to rigorous application of APQP and a stride towards 2 CPK processes. And then the third dimension is the people level. And generally my experiences over quite a few years involved with this in terms of aerospace is it does bring people together. It's amazing what people start realizing what they can achieve when applying APQP, and it just brings a different viewpoint and perspective between the members of the cross-functional team in regards to building quality within the product and the process. If we could move on one, please. So let's just take a moment and then start dismantling actually what all these requirements are, which potentially, if you were to look at the lens of AS 13100 and APQP, what are we asking for? We're asking for a significant amount, or we're asking first of all for AS 9145 requirements to be complied to. And then within AS 13100, there is a small amount of additions that are added just to help APQP and PPAP application within the aero engine business side. And then finally, because of the work that's gone on through AS 13100 and commonising our practices across the member companies, it's reduced the amount of customer-specific requirements that are actually required. So customers will add a small piece into the customers' requirements in terms of this overall stack of requirements, but essentially that's reduced massively. You could say if you took those standards, there's quite a few pages involved, and that's where we play the role out of, or there's a strong role in this around the RM 30145 standard or guidance material, and that's what I want to talk about. If you look at the requirements documents, there's quite a few pages involved. The way we present APQP through RM 30145 is to simplify it, is to start breaking that down into a set of components and make it more understandable for the masses rather than keeping it a specialized subject for the few. If you could move on one, please. So as a starting point of thinking about what proportion of APQP is used, let's just start with this image. This is in 3100 standard. It is a typical layout which you would see in many industries of representing APQP. The diagram itself going left to right relates to time, and the key points around datums around time is what's called events. So we have these colorful icons on here which represents events, and they're a really important thing to build into your project management processes and practices. The reason being is their representation of time. For any application of APQP from left to right, they are given clear points where deliverables need to be achieved, and certain levels of approvals need to take place. The other useful thing about the events and the way APQP is laid out in this format is it does give clarity about time going left to right. Many standards will write many things, contain various requirements in them, but they don't necessarily give clarity about at what point should that requirement be delivered. So one of the benefits of laying it out, describing APQP in this type of framework is that it gives clarity around at points in time where requirements need to be achieved. And that's really important on the team front, the cross-functional team working aspect, because it gives really good clarity for the members of the team and what they own in terms of activities of when they should synchronize with each of the members of the team, but also between teams. So an example of events in terms of APQP is what's called production readiness review event. And how's that benefit? Well, there's 57% design make on the line. There was 26% make to print. both organisations need to manufacture product. Production readiness review is a really good example of one of the powerful events that you have in APQP. What's it focusing on? It's looking back to the left-hand side of this framework and asking, have the deliverables that should have been taken place at this point in time been adequately achieved? It also asks, how are we prepared for manufacturing product through something called production preparation? And then it also then looks forwards in terms of the activities that go on in terms of phase 4 around validation activities, i.e. the production process run, first article, PPAP. And that's just an example of one event. Involved in that event is many people, and they've got many different responsibilities. But what this does is, at a point in time, using this one event as an example, it galvanizes clarity about what is expected to have been achieved at that point during this framework. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So, taking that framework and one more step further, then what's actually going on in these different phases? Well, when we talk about phases in APQP, these are these little bars that are represented on this graphic. There's phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can read them from what you can see on screen. And what we like to do is represent this to make it a more understandable what's happening in a flight analogy. So think at the beginning of APQP, really what we're trying to do is get ready for takeoff. So we need to do various preparations that need to be built in to what we plan to do. And this is what we call the planning deliverables. There's a set of these. They are conducted during the planning phase, this early stage of APQP, and they get us ready for our departure. PDR is an important point of the departure, and then going forwards, we can then build some more deliverables that take place. If you want to carry on with the slide, please. So the next piece is when we talk about our departure from the PDR, the departure gate, we're off, we're in flight, and we have something called elements. And again, these are a set of deliverables that take place as we work through left to right of this cycle. So we can break these elements down and to make them really clear. If you want to carry on revealing. So as we go through the flight, we can say there's elements that relate to the product design development activities. There are elements that relate to the process design and development activities. And then finally, when we come down to that land touch point, we get to what's called the production launch aspect, and before that, ensuring that the validations are taking place. So we can describe it in a very simplistic way from left to right and actually break those down into what's called planning deliverables, the upfront view, and then the elements that take place as we progress from the point of PDR onwards. The visual on here is just giving you a feel for how many are in there. We're deliberately not trying to pull out on any of these elements of deliverables at this point in time. What we want to do is give you that simple view of life. When we talk about the AS 9145 and AS 13100, what we're doing through the gold book and which is RM 3145 is we're breaking these down into more understandable chunks so that you can understand what is required to be done. So think of these as a menu. As any good menu, that means there's a level of selection that takes place. So we represent within how we describe APQP a set of deliverables. Those deliverables we can break out into phases: planning phase, the design development phases, the validation. And therefore we can make it really clear what's expected at points in time going left to right. If you move on, so that's given a picture of how we break these down. And it's really important to recognize that within these elements, and many of those actually are what drive for zero defects. They are the things that once deliver can build in defect prevention within our processes and within the products. So within this suite of deliverables, we have those individual items that actually ensure that we build zero defects into our manufacturing processes and within our products. So we move on one more, please. So think about the content of APQP as a menu. The next question needs to be, well, what amount do I use? How do I determine which of these I actually use? And there's two key pointers we give in terms of the gold box. The first one is the organization type. So we started with the question about those who are on the line today, you know, what's your organizations and what percentage are represented? So in terms of the responses, I think it was 57 said design make, 50%, 57%, 26% was saying make to print. The first cut you can see on here is design make. The design org aspect will cover the planning deliverables, but they cover the pink area, the product design development. But if you are a make to print, you're not accountable for the pink area, but you will be considering aspects of the planning deliverables. And then likewise, when we go across the remaining elements, again, if you're a make organization, so that's a design make or make to print, again, those will be your accountability. So the first piece is what's your accountability as an organization is the first cut of these, of which ones are used and which ones aren't. So the 26 that are on 26% which are make to print, immediately the pink, that 1 to 6 are not deliverables that you're accountable for. So that's reduced the list already. If you could move on one more, please. The other thing to think about then is, well, okay, but how then do we work out of all these elements that an organization is accountable for, which ones should be applied? The other piece in this is what we call change situations, and examples of change situation could be introducing a new product design, transferring from one facility to another, a process change. They are all change situations as examples. And then what we have in the manuals is in the gold book RM 30145, we have what's called application tables, and this clearly maps against these different types of changes which deliverable you should be thinking about when planning for APQP and conducting APQP. So again, we can take the menu with some simple guidance around what your responsibilities as an organization and the type of change you're dealing with. You can disseminate that information into quite an easy, understandable format to go, these are the deliverables that must be enacted in terms of APQP. If you could move on one, please. So just a moment of reflection on change situations. The graphic you see here is just giving a representation, a feeling around typically how long from start to finish would different types of change situations take. And the point behind this graphic is to say, look, if you're using if it's a brand new design, it's going to take probably a lot longer than say a process change that you're managing. What's the point behind this? What this allows you to do is become more experienced, or the point to reflect on with this is the type of change is an opportunity to gain some learning around around applying APQP in itself. So if I was to say process changes, there was quite a number. I think 50% of you were saying you're going to be experiencing process changes over the next 6 months. That's a great opportunity to start learning parts of this, what makes up APQP. It's not typically what I hear is a lot of people will say, well, it's all about new product design and we've got to do it on new product design only, and that's where the focus should be. Just reflect on some of the experiences, opportunities you've got over coming months in terms of applying APQP in the sense of, what about process changes? Why not proportion a certain, why not invest in time in understanding how well and how good you can get at applying APQP for the shorter lead times, and use that as an opportunity to learn, as well as these longer lead times. And as suppliers, you know, it's really important to remember that customers will gravitate to good suppliers in terms of QCD. And what I mean by that, the more competitive you become at APQP, the better you will be at ensuring quality and cost and delivery performance, which is a natural want for any customers going forward. Can you move on one more slide, please? The final pieces I want to cover now is I'm going to introduce something, and you can download this chart from the supplements page in that's found on the Aero Engine Supplier Quality site. A link can be put in the chat for this, but I just want to feature this chart. What this does, where we've talked about, there's decisions around which amount of these elements would you use as an example. The other thing is, when would you use them? And this generally is found, generally I find that as really good responses around this one-page document, because what it does is it maps from left to right for the individual elements. So we've talked about these, we've given you these icon numbers, describe it to represent the various elements that are involved. And what you can do with this document is you'll see that they are registered on here. And it does give a presentation against time of when something should start, some of these elements should start and finish. So it's a really handy guide for people to use. Today is not about giving you the ins and outs and detail in regards to this document, but really make sure that you're aware that this is available. We've talked about application matrix. They help you decide which of these elements to use. This makes it really clear of when you would use these elements start to finish. And the important thing is, when we talk about planning APQP, one of the expectations out of the planning phase is what's called the project plan. And that is what's been created in the early stages of APQP between the kickoff and PDR events. In the analogy of flight, that pre-work that goes on before you take off. This becomes a really helpful way to people in terms of team members when trying to work out, once we know which aspects of APQP, the elements in this example, are to be applied, when would we think about using it? And the example you see on screen now is number 10 is what's known as process FMEA. And the visual is just demonstrating to you, it's showing a start and finish points against these events, these colourful bubbles. So it's a really helpful planning tool. If we could move on one, please. Okay, I'm going to wrap up now. Before I wrap up, I would like you to refer back to the Slido. And what I'd like you to do is think about, I haven't mentioned PPAP in the sense of anything about what is PPAP, but from your experiences of PPAP, just use a word that would help you describe what PPAP is about. So that's what I'm looking for from your good selves. There's at the moment 67 people online. Words are coming in, which is great. Just give us a word. What's a word you would say that you would use as a description for PPAP? I'll let this keep going. We've got a number now. We've got probably a third of you have given a response. Come on, don't be shy. All you have to do is, it's one word. So we've got strong words coming through: quality, proof, evidence, control are the stronger words that are coming through at the moment. Anything more from yourselves? So half of you now have responded. So that's 2/3 of you. Okay, we've got some of the words coming through you can read on screen. Massive word called evidence in this. There is a number of equally strong words around approval, quality, verification, proof, proactive. Okay, you can read the words. That's over 2/3 of you actually given that response. If we could reveal the next slide, please. So what I would say is the response you're given is a pleasing one, because the word in terms of PPAP I would like to leave you with is evidence. And let me put this in the context of wrapping up what we've just covered. So first of all, we've described, briefly introduced this this analogy of flight. And be really strong on throughout the flight APQP activities around APQP are taking place. And that's within this framework. So what's the role of PPAP? Well, PPAP's evidence. Of the list of elements we've just talked about today, I know we haven't gone into details of what they are, but of that list of some of the number of elements that are available to be used with APQP, a subset of those are focused on, and they are the pieces of evidence that we'll look for. So what's really pleasing is the word evidence is coming from the majority of you, which is good. That's the role of PPAP. It's given us evidence. PPAP is not the deliverable. It is a check on what's required. And what's its role? It is a point in time to understand, based on the result, the disposition, what should be taking place next in terms of ongoing delivery. But the key message really want to leave with people is think about the APQP elements, do them well, and PPAP's an easy approval. If you're not doing APQP well, that's why PPAP is hard to get a pass. So if we can just go to the final slide now, please. So what I would want to leave you to is just a set of recommendations before we move on to the next section. Really strong emphasis we're trying to give you is the importance of cross-functional working and project management. So our recommendations would be within your process, your project management process, ensure that you've got a strong cross-functional APQP representation within that. You know, make sure that you've got that defined within your quality management systems, that process and how APQP operates, and use things like the application matrices I've mentioned. Go and have a look at 13100, 13145, and have a look at those tables and build them into how you create your plans, along with the timing plan that I've just mentioned. These documents are available off our the supplements web page in the Aero Engine Supplier Documents suite, and make sure that you build cross-functional training in. This is a team sport, and we've already mentioned that this has been videoed. This will become available over, no doubt, over the next couple of weeks. Use this type of webinar to brief your leadership, to start getting people familiar with what's taking place.